anything about me before I just randomly start talking?
Who are you?
Fair enough. I'd rather do a little max, and then I'll see you guys. So, work at Resilience Code, do a lot of sports science stuff, work with several teams and whatnot. Outside of RC, for sports science integration, making it useful, making it understandable. A lot of shit's confusing. And it's cool to learn about, and then day as a strength coach, you're like, well, what the hell do I do with it? Right? So a lot of this is supposed to be going over the science portion of it, and then actually going over like how I've used it, how other teams have used it, and how I think it fit for you guys. Because it's a small crew, feel free to stop me at any point in time and ask questions. If I'm going to answer the question later on, I'll just give me a minute and get there. But if you have questions about it, some of the concepts of it, feel free to stop me. I can ramble on and talk forever, so I apologize in advance. So I got strength conditioning coach, athletic trainer, played college sports. So I'm a nerd who actually did things though, so unlike most nerds who are just nerds, I at least understand what it is to be an athlete. So hopefully this makes a lot of sense and is useful. Cool, we'll get rolling. Cool, all right. I start everything off with a quote, typically, because everyone else does, so I figure I'd follow suit. But my quote's a lot cooler. I put it in front in the beginning just so we appreciate when we talk about this kind of stuff in regards to velocity-based training. It's only one really small piece of the puzzle. These are some old quotes, some old Russians back in the day. They knew a lot more than we did back then. Kind of unfortunate that we're just learning about it now. So one of them is, when organizing the management of training, one ought to consider in preparing for competition that various disruptive factors, work, living condition, diet, means of restoration, and so forth, can affect the sportsman. In other words, a lot of stuff going on in an athlete's life, and we need to be aware that when we're training them, to only think about training, about loads and reps and isolation, isn't going to do us much good. We got to appreciate kind of the bigger scheme. And the second one is, in order to avoid the undesirable influence of disruptive factors, such as outside living, the coach should arrange a system of control which would aid in obtaining crucial and periodic information concerning the athlete's state of trainability. Such control can be achieved through the use of special devices, control exercises, tests, permitting the assessment of the sportsman's state of trainability as a whole or the individual system of his body at a certain stage of training. Long story short, it basically means we need to measure our athletes while they train to see what the heck's going on and understand whether they're fatigued, whether they're ready, whether or not they're able to adapt to the stimulus we're going to give them. So we're going to be talking about velocity-based training, and ultimately we can use that to help as one of these special tests or devices or equipment to help understand if the athlete is able to train that day and how well they can train. So despite the Russians being super smart and controlling everything, we don't have those communist ways now. They come in and they might have partied last night, had one too many drinks, or I guess if they were younger kids, had an exam or whatever. They come in that day and they're trashed. So it's our role as a coach then to modify around their life, because we don't get to control their life to change our training. So we're not communist Russia. So another thing I want to stop and appreciate too is that optimal adaptation. So we're looking at achieving adaptation. We always want to achieve it in the most efficient and effective way. It's the optimal internal biological environment. So what the heck is going on inside of you? If you have a sickness, you have a cold, you're not going to adapt as well. Plus the optimal training stimulus equals optimal adaptation. So when we use these tools, we're trying to understand inferentially, so what their internal environment's like. If that person didn't jump very high, or that person didn't have that good of a bar velocity, why? Right, are they sick? Do they have a cold? Do they study last night a whole bunch? And then what stimulus can I give them to elicit the adaptation they need for that day? We've all done it before. Anyone's gone out and had a late night, probably Taco Bell at 12 a.m., right? And someone say, hey, go run a 40-yard dash, give me your best time the next day. Probably not going to be too hot, right? And so that's kind of a really, really big representation of what happens to a kid when they get stressed out over a week. Their parents are pushing them. Their league, I guess a travel coach making them throw 90,000 innings in a week. It happens, unfortunately. It's like, okay, how do I then make my training session effective? So we're going to be talking about velocity-based training. What is it, how we can use it, how we can integrate it, and how it empowers you as a coach to make some decisions that you might otherwise not be, I guess, armed with to make without that information. So have you guys heard about velocity-based training yet? Y'all got a gym aware over there, I saw. Have you used it? Some? You guys know the basics behind, outside of measuring how fast something moves, you understand the idea? Somewhat, maybe? If not, that's cool. We'll get into it a little bit.
Were you here when we did the in-service on gymwear? You.
I don't think he was.
That's fine. What were we talking?
We had summer interns, I think.
So yeah, we did like an in-service on just VBT stuff, strength, speed, continuum, just where the diameters are.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna dive a little more deeper into actually how to make that device work for you. That way, it's not like having to read off Brian Mann's card if I need to go this meters a second. How do I make that unique for my athlete? And then in turn, how does that make me a really cool coach? Right? Because if I start having information on data of that athlete, something happens to them, they get hurt. Just like medical records, they're now invested in you, right? So sometimes athletes go, oh, why do I gotta do this? Why do I do that? Oh, it's for the best. Believe me, trust me. And something goes wrong, but now you have information to lead you as a coach to be a little more armed for these situations. So how it works, this is called force velocity profiling. Have you heard that term somewhat? Yeah? A little bit. So this is how you force velocity profile one somewhat. And this is an example on the right, bottom right. You take 4 different loads, 4 to 5, ranging from 35 to 80% of the person's 1 RM. You have them do 1 to 3 reps, obviously reducing reps as you get heavier. You take the top velocity from each set. On the right, you literally see someone's top velocity in the bench press. 0.5 meters a second, he moved 230 pounds. At 1.3, he moved roughly 100. At 0.9, he moved 135. Right, so that's his actual profile all plotted out. Right, and one thing you see about that is when you plot all these out, it's a pretty damn straight line. Right? The R squared on that, if you guys are in the literature, it's 0.99, which is basically made up. I wouldn't accept it in textbooks because it's so damn straight. What that does, it allows me to take, who remembers like slopes, like y equals mx plus b, remember that thing? Right, it tells you how a line works. Because it's a straight line, I can actually use that equation, and we'll use it a little bit later, I actually have a full demo on it, to plot out his entire force velocity profile. So how fast he should move a bar at 0.73 meters a second. So how much weight he should lift. How fast he should move 175 pounds to the dot. And there's something called minimal voluntary threshold, MVT. This basically means your 1 RM occurs at this speed. For bench press, it's roughly 0.15 meters a second. That's where your 1 RM typically occurs at. For squat, it's 0.3. For a deadlift, it's depending on if your high handles or low handles, it's probably 0.2 in that ballpark, 0.25. I typically err on the easy side, so I say 0.2 for bench press, I say 0.35 for a squat, and then 0.25 for a deadlift, just to be safe. Then again, you can use this formula, as you see here, this is the raw data plotted out right here, to help predict and project a force velocity profile for your athlete.
I have a question. So today, like I told you earlier, we're reintroducing some VBT stuff to the guys that we work with. So he's starting it today. With that, instead of just giving him, 0.63 or whatever to start, right? What should we do today?
I would profile him.
Okay.
Giving this, you can look up Mladen Jovanovic, M-L-A-D-E-N, J-O-V-A-N-I-C-O something. Smart dude. Has a neat little paper on it that breaks on the steps. Long story short, that paper basically tells you 5 sets. You want to do roughly, again, loads between 30 to 75%. So if I had an athlete, I'd say, hey, do the bar, do 95, do 135, 185, do strong, do 225.
And just see where they're at, the speed.
And what you want to do is you take the top velocity from each set, and you want to look at that R squared, because that R squared, my finger shadow right there, this point right there, is really shitty, like something 0.8. Maybe one of the reps they're just being a lazy ass on, right? Because it requires them to have maximal effort each rep, or maybe you didn't rest them long enough. So you can actually go and manually remove one of the reps if it looks weird. So if I circle, if I look at this dot here, let's say it was way up, way down here, the other ones were all in line, I just knew he was being a lazy ass right here. So I just get rid of it. Science. Fair? Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I'll have a full demo on how to do this on Excel. This is an awesome book. J.B. Morin wrote it. It talks about really details on force velocity profiling and how you can use it for some of the more advanced ways. Look at someone's maximal strength, look at their maximal power, and also look at where they sit in terms of are they force proficient or velocity deficient, what they need for training, and how you can use that to monitor training progress over time. So there's a couple ways, again, to use velocity-based training to profile an athlete, but there's also ways you can look at it from a more basic standpoint of understanding strength qualities. You actually see later on, like this is here, like it's example of optimal profiles and optimal power profiles. We'll get to that. It's actually really not that confusing. It's pretty simple. So understanding strength qualities, right? We know that someone who's really strong doesn't mean they run fast, and someone who runs fast doesn't mean they're really strong. Right? Someone who moves something quickly might be really proficient at something called speed strength. Right? Someone who's powerlifter is awesome at absolute strength. Right? So the way I look at it is I look at it in terms of the power curve. So if we go over here, you see this nice straight line, right? You see that? Makes sense? So that's someone's force velocity profile. That's going from load to velocity. But what you do is you can take load times velocity and you get your power. So that power curve. You see that curve right there? That's basically literally load times velocity. So it's what's called a derivative metric, or a metric that comes from force velocity profile. Again, we're going to go over this, how to make it at the end. If I zoom in, here is a power curve. I have removed that linear line, and you can see that if we're looking at power, power A and power B are the same number, right? They're all looking like it's roughly, what, 90, power A, power B? But one is produced on one side of the curve, where my velocity is 1 meter a second, and one's produced, my velocity is 0.4 meters a second. So power is contextual to the velocity of which is done. So you can have an athlete who puts up a lot of power, but he's really good at heavy weights. So we want to be explosive, you probably want to get this side of the power curve a little stronger. Makes sense? There's always one optimal power curve, because the curve, you have one apex, one peak, one top of the mountain. That's optimal power. And that then can shift along the velocity spectrum, so that curve can move all the way over here if that person's really good at 1 meter a second. So these things are all malleable. I mean, they can move around, you can change them, it's kind of like clay, right? You might start off one way, but you can mold it into something else. So here is an example of that linear force velocity curve with the power curve on top and how it's broken down into different qualities. You have your absolute strength, your strength speed. At the apex, you have optimal power. Below that, you have speed strength. This is a funny term. People call it explosive. Some people call it high velocity. It's kind of this hodgepodge of definitions. Basically, it just means something faster than speed strength. All right? People like Brian may use the word explosive strength. Some people use the word, high speed. People use high velocity. I just labeled it explosive because that's what I like to use. And then below that is speed, which is basically no load. That's as fast as you can get. So this is actually someone's real profile from them squatting. This is the guy I work with. 1.8 is how fast you can move an empty bar. How fast you can move, right? A heavy bar, this is a percentage of 1 RM, going from 1 down to 0. Does that make sense? Yeah. I got another slide right after this that breaks it down to the graph.
So your 0 is going to be just bar speed? That'll be like...
Yep. Typically I won't measure it though, because what happens is people don't like to produce max effort with a really light bar.
Right.
Because they don't feel comfortable. So I typically do 35%, but you can project it out. I'll show you when we get to the Excel. So save that question. On any questions how to make this stuff, we'll go over at the end. This is that same curve, broken down to how the hell I use as a coach. Right? This is cool. That looks like science. Right? Neat. How the hell do I use that shit, right? Well, let's go here. Now I have that same curve, so here's my 1 to 0, 1 RM. Right? Here's the velocity. And the power is just the 1 times 0.3 to give me a % relative power. Does that make sense? So back to this curve, 1 to 0. Back here, 1 to 0. Everything's colored in the same way. Yeah? So I have absolute strength, I have speed strength, strength speed, explosive and speed, and that's all based on that individual's profile. So no longer am I saying, oh man, I think this guy's speed strength occurs at 0.6 meters a second. I know his speed strength